Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of MAPS, the Meet a Professional series. I'm joined here by Dr. Skyler Kelly, who is very excited to speak with you all, answer your questions, answer our questions, and talk about her very decorated career in clinical psychology. And essentially, to get the most out of this program, as we have in previous MAPS editions, you may put your questions in the chat if it's something that comes up during our conversation. If it's relevant, I'll add it into the dialogue. And if we can save it for after, we're going to open up the floor for about 5 to 15 minutes, time permitting, in order for us to all have a conversation together. And you can pick Dr. Kelly's brain about her insight and experiences. So without further ado, Dr. Kelly, why don't you tell us about yourself and why you chose a career in clinical psychology?
Okay, well, hello, welcome everybody. It's great to meet you, at least virtually. I came to the field of psychology initially from the field of education. I trained as an educator, as a teacher, went to Boston University, trained in the social sciences as well as education. I was really interested initially on how we learn and how to increase learning potential and make learning more effective. So I was really interested in how the brain learns and how to develop curricula that would be enhanced with psychology so that we could actually combine neuroscience with education to make learning more productive and more efficient. So I came to it from an education background, and then I worked for many years in the nonprofit sector. And when I was about 28, I had been working in Manhattan for several years. I just really had sort of an epiphany and kind of dramatic. I packed up my briefcase because we used briefcases back there in the 80s. I packed up my briefcase at my office on Broadway and 48th Street. Went down the elevator. I was on the 35th floor. Went down the elevator, took the number 1 train up to 116th Street, walked into Columbia University, walked into the bookstore, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do what I always wanted to do. So I decided right then and there to get my PhD. And so I looked at different programs. And back then in the 80s, getting your PhD was a little bit different. There were different requirements, which might be interesting to you guys. So for example, this was kind of before the real computer world evolved. Most programs, including those in New York, you had to be fluent in a language, in a foreign language. And so I, took a foreign language, went to school during the mornings or at night, in addition to my graduate work, so I could pass the fluency exam. And then lo and behold, when I was getting my master's, the rules changed, and at Yeshiva, I could do computer science or prove computer efficiency in lieu of a foreign language. So isn't that interesting? Okay. So I ended up getting my master's in counseling psychology from NYU. I ended up getting another master's in psychology from Yeshiva en route to my PhD, which is in clinical health psychology. There it is. And I graduated from Yeshiva, I think in 97, but picked up my degree in 98 from Yeshiva University. I did my internship in pediatric and neuropsych psychology at the University of Minnesota Hospitals and Clinics. I then went and did a postdoc fellowship in neuropsychology at New York Hospital, Cornell Medical Center, where I was also an instructor and on faculty. Then I did 2 postdoc fellowships in neuropsych and psychological oncology at Memorial Sloan Kettering and New York Hospital. And then I've been in private practice since about 2000. And I'm also the founder of Positiva Teens, which is a webinar and workshop based practice where I do speeches around the country that utilizes strategies of positive psychology and CPT along with neuropsych to help train educators and parents and teens about the dangers of the digital age on their developing brains. So that's it in a nutshell.
Terrific. Thank you very much for sharing. Off to a great start. So you had mentioned that you pursued and earned several different degrees and education credentials. Can you tell us about what went into the decision to pursue further study in these areas specifically, and how it's impacted or bolstered your career over time?
Well, for myself, I would say that having the education background and having had the experience of being a teacher really helped me be a better psychologist. So much of what we do in psychology and even in business, when I was, in the nonprofit world, so much of what we do is teaching. We're teaching our patients, we're teaching parents we work with, or family members. So much of what you have to do clinically, let's say you work at a hospital or in an academic institution, you have to have those skills of presenting and teaching others. So I think that was, good on two fronts, both just, intellectually, academically, but then practically having those skills as an educator to present and lead and be, someone in a position of educating others. So that went into it. And I really, personally, I just really found myself not fulfilled in the business world. I had a passion where I really had a life goal of getting my PhD and becoming a psychologist. And in my work, in my first graduate training experience at NYU, I further became interested in neuroscience. And I had an externship with a very famous psychologist in New York. You guys won't know because he's been dead since 1992, but he was really one of the top psychologists in New York. And he told me one day that, in order to make a living and to get a job that paid, I better really focus on assessment. And that really wasn't my passion then, but he turned out to be true. And I developed a real passion for assessment, for evaluation. I love evaluating. It helped me get my internships. It helped me get my fellowships. It helped me launch my private practice. I never thought I'd really like it. And then once I jumped into it and really became proficient at it, I discovered it's a true art form, and it helped me be a much better clinician. It's certainly a much better diagnostician in therapy. So I spent a lot of time just doing straight neuropsych, and I really missed the clinical therapeutic aspect of it. But the neuropsych assessment part of it paid the bills.
Understood. Thank you for
Just being
sharing.
honest, guys. I'm just being honest. Okay.
I appreciate the honesty. Thank you very much. So you mentioned having, earlier the story, you took the train to 116, you decided this is what you'd like to do. So did you, in a way, at any point during your career, even at the very beginning, have a plan for how it is that you wanted your career to go? And if
Yeah.
so, was having a practice also a part of that plan?
Yes. I always knew I wanted to have a practice because that's just me. I wanted independence. Which turned out to be the truth because I've worked in different areas. I've worked in academia, I've worked in hospitals, I've worked in a clinical research setting, and I've done private practice. And just for me, having that private practice allowed me some freedom. And also, as the world changed in academia and in psychology from the 90s through the early 2000s, academia and work in medical centers became very much research driven and funding driven. And I found that I did not want to compromise my professional integrity by the pressures to get funding.
Understood. So considering what you know about the field from your experience, what are some specific or even general things that our audience should know about pursuing a career in clinical psych? And if you could pick just one major thing that you wish you knew when you first pursued this career path, what would that be?
Okay, so the number one thing, and this relates to the second part of your previous question. I did a lot of interviewing of psychologists and grad students when I was starting my graduate studies. And this was when I started my master's. So and I was an older student, so I was 28 when I started. So it was like, I already had some work under me. Of interest, when I went to NYU, they actually wanted people that were older. So there are some graduate programs like PhD programs. NYU used to be like that. I don't know if it still is, that actually did not want people right out of undergrad. They want you to have some real life experience. So if you do have that, that's a plus, I think. I interviewed a lot of people, which was incredibly helpful, like better than any advisor at school. So use your network from undergrad and now there's social media. There wasn't back then, but go on different platforms to find people that can help you and advise you, and just give you some guidance about the trajectory of the graduate program that you'll be on, and then also how to launch your career. So that's the one thing that I would definitely recommend. I would also be proactive and look at perhaps long term where you might want to live, because I find that still today, a lot of your job opportunities and opportunities for fellowship will come out of your internship.
Mhm.
So your internship's really important. If you guys, some of you may not be in graduate school yet, but if you are in graduate school and you're gonna, look for your internship, it was definitely an advantage to me to have an APA internship. Many of the fellowships are only available to people who had APA internships. So I would definitely, do that. I did my internship in the Midwest, which is where I was originally from. I found that really helpful because I felt like I made more contacts from being in the Midwest than if I had just stayed in the New York region. So don't limit yourself. I would say that don't limit yourself, because you never know where you're going to end up down the road. The second thing along with that, I had a disadvantage, and I was talking earlier to Matt about this. I had a real disadvantage that I didn't realize how much of a disadvantage it was. When I was at Yeshiva and I was in the clinical health psychology program, it wasn't APA approved. And now it is, but back then it wasn't. And still to this day, I cannot practice in certain states. They will not allow me to sit for licensure or get a license because of when I went to Yeshiva, it wasn't APA approved. The only way I could get a license is if I had passed my boards. And I didn't do my board. So that's the third thing. So really consider it. I think it would behoove you to be board certified. Back then, 20 years ago, it wasn't as big a deal. But I think now for portability and the flexibility to go to different states and practice, I think you should think about that after you're done with your training and after you're done with your fellowship. It is a lot of work, but I think it's worth it.
Terrific. Thank you.
Question?
For the group, any questions and any follow-up, if you'd like to ask, please be sure to put them in the chat so that we can get more of the conversation going. Our next question is, as far as shadowing, internships, or work experience, what would you say is most valuable for our audience to gain while pursuing their degrees?
Just get any amount of work experience you can. Whatever it is, take it. And sometimes people will call me or email me and they'll ask how can I get a good internship, or how can I plan for, getting into this career? And I'll say, well, you know what, for example, this is a great example. This happened to me recently. I'll say, well, you know what, there's a really, really great fellowship or internship available right now at the VA. Happens to be in Connecticut, where I work part-time. And this person said to me, well, I'm not really interested in working with veterans. Well, that's short-sighted. I'm not saying you're going to do it the rest of your life. I'm just saying, get this internship. It's paid. Get the work experience. Don't limit yourself. I mean, take it. Take whatever you can take, because out of that experience, you will get so many invaluable things like mentoring. You will learn aspects of psychology that's beyond what you're going to be getting at Yeshiva. You will get potential references down the road, which are something you need. I am not kidding you. I recently, a year ago, I had to call Yeshiva and get a reference from a professor. Now, I haven't been there in 20 years. Unfortunately, most of the guys that were my professors are either retired or passed away. But thank God, Fred Foley was there. And he remembered me. I had to track Bill Arsenio down in Connecticut. I don't think he teaches there anymore. But and I had to track down someone from my fellowship in New York to vouch for me and fill out a form. So you never know that. So get as many adults, people in the field on your team. You need to build your own personal board of directors and cultivate that personal board of directors throughout your career. Because as psychologists, there's so much paperwork that you have to continually fill out as you go through your life. Let's say you want to get a license in another state down the road, or get a job somewhere, or become a faculty member, teach somewhere, even part-time teaching. You got to have those references. So establish your board of directors, keep in touch with them, and cultivate those relationships throughout your career.
Excellent, thank you. We've got a couple questions from the group. First of which is in reference a bit to what you mentioned earlier about skills, specifically assessment and evaluation. The question is, what are the top 3 skills one must possess to do well in your field?
Okay, I think in psychology, I think evaluation and assessment, because that is billable and that's tactile and that's material goods that we can charge for and that we can get jobs doing, whether it's in a hospital or a school or in some clinical practice. So I think that that's really important. It still is, true today. There are a lot of places where you can't bill for the therapy, or they won't, or insurance doesn't take it, but insurance pays a higher rate for the assessments, for example, if you're on a panel. And I think the field is being flooded by people who, frankly, take these 6-week coaching courses. So there's a level of professionalism and marketability if you do assessment. I think the second thing that's really great is if you have any experience co-teaching a class or working in leading a class. If I had those opportunities when I was at Yeshiva, where I was able to co-lead a class in graduate school or be a TA, those are marketable abilities that people are looking for when you apply for a job or even an internship. And 3, just, flexible clinical skills. Don't just be one kind of a clinician, like don't just be a CBT person, or, don't just practice or train in one aspect of psychology. Be flexible so that you can be marketable.
Understood. We had some follow-up questions, kind of shifting gears back to education. And the question is there a disadvantage in getting a PsyD as opposed to PhD in terms of becoming a clinical psychologist?
I don't really think there is. I'm biased because I have a PhD. I know I had better training back then. That was back in the day, 20 years ago. I had better training than a lot of the PsyDs just because I had more courses and more training. I just said I had more training. I think it depends on the school. And I think I'm just telling you this. I know I'm biased because I'm a yeshiva person. I think I had an advantage with the type of academics and clinical training I had as a yeshiva person. I mean, I have every yeshiva person I've met, and from every program, and that includes social work as well, just really excellent. It's just, I think a top program. And if you say, if I meet someone and they went to yeshiva, I can trust that they have a level of excellence that is probably above and beyond most clinicians I work with. But I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but I'm biased. But that's been my experience. I think that I can confidently say that you all are getting a really excellent education.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you. I have two more questions of my own and then several from the Q&A. So I'm going to knock these next two out, and then we'll switch over to full Q&A to allow for the group to engage. You mentioned networking and a board of directors. How might you guide students who may be networking now or are considering doing so in assembling that board of directors so that they could get the most out of it and get the most support?
Yeah, well, number one is connect positively with staff members or older graduate students that you might meet on your externships or internships. That's number one. People that aren't in your program. Choose your dissertation committee carefully. That's the other thing. You want people that are supportive and want people who have time. We didn't get into that, but I just want to, can I segue into that right now? Because that's part of your board.
Certainly. Go right ahead.
That's super important. And advocate for people to be on your committee and to be your readers, if you are allowed one or two outside readers on your committee. Choose people that have the time for you, not necessarily the people that in your department that might be convenient or people that have a particular interest. If I were to do it over again, I would be more selective. I had one guy on my committee at YU who's a well-known guy, who was busy, and he called me up the night before my defense at 10 o'clock. And he said, well, I'm just reading your dissertation right now, and I won't be able to sign off tomorrow. I have real questions about your statistics.
Oh my goodness.
This was the night before.
Wow.
And I mean, that's just so unprofessional on so many levels. So I think, the problem is this, and I'm just being really candid, you guys, but the problem is this. A lot of people in academia are not business people. They don't treat it professionally like a business. They're academicians or students protracted in an academic environment forever. So I would say, you're laying out a lot of money to go to graduate school, a lot of money. And so you need to treat this like a business more than school. So be very selective on who you want to be on your dissertation committee. Be very honest and upfront about your expectations, and then hold them accountable for their expectations, what they expect from your dissertation. And the expectation should include, I want and I need XYZ, whether it's I need a monthly meeting with you, I need you to read my drafts at least 2 months before my defense. You set up a timetable, you manage that committee. You do not expect them to supervise and manage you, because you're going to be too busy, or else, God forbid, something should happen. Like one of my dissertation chair died. So, and I had to find somebody else. So anticipate the Chutes and Ladders game of your dissertation. Do you guys remember that game, Chutes and Ladders or Candyland? Because
Yes.
that's kind of what it's like.
Mhm.
So anticipate that and you manage it. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent analogies, and I hope the group does remember when they think of this, when they think of Dr. Kelly giving the advice, it's Chutes and Ladders, so that they can.
Yeah. So I would say be really careful about who you choose, people that you can count on. And then, like I said, cultivate the relationships. I've had many people ask me to be their quote unofficial mentor or whatever. And then think about, having a supervisor that's not in your program, somebody outside the program, get support from alum. Utilize, I did not do this and I wish I did. Utilize your YU alumni network because there are a lot of people that want to help you.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. Thank you. One final question from my docket, then we're going to switch to the Q&A. In general, where do you see your field headed in the next 5 years? And that may be marred or impacted by what our current circumstances are. But what are those changes that you anticipate, and how will you be adjusting to those changes and developments?
Okay, so I think one way it's really going to change, as I said, the market's really saturated and you're going to have a lot of competition with people that don't have your level of education. And that's disappointing. There are a lot of life coaches in the field and a lot of people who are, hanging out a shingle that you're going to be competing with. So you have to figure out what makes you different, how you're going to market yourself differently. I think that's going to change. I think there's going to be less, unfortunately, less professionalism and less of a difference between people, clinicians such as ourselves who spent a lot of money on graduate school providing services. So I think it's up to us as a profession to figure out how we're going to move in that direction. I think testing will still be really important. I'm hearing from people that there's a lot of pressure being put right now on APA and the different states to allow an extension of virtual therapies and to allow therapies cross state lines. I really hope that's true because there's no need for it. I think that, there continues to be a paucity of psychology help in the Midwest and in rural areas that will continue. You really need that. There's going to be, continuing need for people who are addiction specialists and a continuing need for people who are specialists in aging, dementia, Alzheimer's care, and helping caregivers. So that's the real thing. Things that I don't, are you ready for what I worry about?
I'm ready. Go for it.
I'm very worried about politics entering psychology and dictating care and dictating research. I just don't think it has a place for that. So I worry about that. And that sort of was something that came up during APA this year. I worry about that. I serve and have served on a committee for one of the states I'm licensed in, where we talk to graduate students. And my concern in talking with the graduate students is that, like much of America, they've become fractionated and they've become specialists in their own interest group. And as psychologists, I guess people need to think long and hard about why they're here and what they want to do. If they just want to, it's who do you want to serve? And, and in your training, and I hope this happens, I will tell you the other negative. When we were in training years ago in New York at both NYU and Yeshiva, we had a lot of mandates for what we call multicultural training and cultural sensitivity. And people are kind of surprised at that in different parts of the country because you have to show your curricula or your transcripts.
Mhm.
And they're kind of incredulous. Oh God, really 30 years ago at NYU, you had to take all these courses in diversity and multiculturalism. I said, yeah, you guys just didn't invent it. This
Mm.
isn't new.
Mhm.
Believe it or not, it's not new. But I think what is happening is I'm having grad students tell me, I only want to work with certain people, or I only want to work with people that identify as XYZ.
Mhm.
And I think that's extremely limiting,
Mhm.
especially if you've invested as much time and money and effort in getting your degree. And I think there's a real professional responsibility that we have as psychologists, to say, no, I'm a psychologist, but I'm only going to treat certain people.
Mhm.
And I think that's I'm getting those responses now, and younger people are talking like that, and that concerns me.
Understood.
I mean, and then that's a personal thing,
Mhm.
but I do think this. Another thing to demand and be vocal about it is when you're on internship or fellowship, to really demand good supervision. That's the other thing that I'm hearing now, that grad students today on internship and fellowship are not getting as much supervision as we got 20 years ago.
Mhm.
They're not getting their own therapy provided free.
Mhm.
It's really stressful. And when you might realize that when you're a psychologist, especially an internship or fellowship, you might have to deal with people you don't like.
Mhm.
There might be patients in front of you who you have an aversion to, and you have to explore that transference and countertransference. And I don't know if you guys discussed that or have that. I'm curious to know if you are. I hope that in supervision you're discussing the emotional human aspect of providing care.
Understood. Great. At this time, we're going to open it up to the group. I know there's some that are probably in and out and heading to different places. That's okay. First and foremost, I'd like to include a link to our survey in case you're on your way out, copy it and keep it. But I'm going to go through some of the questions that are already in the chat and then again, open up the floor to conversation. So one question that was asked was, uh, how difficult is it to open your own private practice?
Oh, great question. For me, it was really easy. It was easier than I thought. Because I'd had some business experience, and I was pretty pioneering in my use of the internet and had a website when other people didn't.
Mhm.
Now it's commonplace. Like I'm not kidding you. Like, in the late 1990s, actually somebody wanted to say that was unethical to have a website.
Interesting.
That's the way it kind of was. Like people didn't advertise, psychologists didn't advertise. Um, so I had a website pretty early on. I still have it. I had catchy email.
Mhm.
So, I don't think it's that hard to open a practice. You might want to do it with someone or go into a large group and
Mhm.
do it. So it wasn't really hard. And pick something that you specialize in, not just be a generalist. So like I did a lot of testing. So, my specialty was neuropsych and kids.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Understood. One question came up about compensation. Is there a salary difference, or what is rather the salary difference between one who primarily does assessments and someone who does solely psychotherapy?
oh, that depends. Great question. Okay, so if you're working for a hospital, or a clinic, or even for one of these virtual therapy practices that are becoming popular, they do reimburse um, people that do assessment at a higher rate than for therapy.
Hmm.
So you're going to make more, and insurance pays more for that. But that's like a one-time hit, right? So therapy is a one-time hit. So not therapy, assessment. So let's say hypothetically, you're going to get X number of hours, or hypothetically, $2,000 for an assessment, right?
Hmm.
And then or if you're working for one of these companies, they'll say, you know what, we pay you $150 an hour, for an evaluation. But for therapy, we only reimburse you like $70 an hour.
Mm.
Okay. But therapy is long-term. So you might get paid less per hour, but it's someone hopefully you're going to be seeing for many, many months, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Some people for years. Okay.
Gotcha. Gotcha. One question as well. What would you say is the best part of your job and maybe even your profession? And what's the worst part of your job in your experience?
Oh, okay. I think the best part is obviously helping people and seeing progress
Mm-hmm.
and seeing people evolve, which is just a great honor. It's an honor and a privilege to be in that role, to help someone discover more about themselves and to grow and to be on their journey with them. It's very humbling to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really great to see. I worked with many, many people that were very ill for many years. I worked for 15 years with primarily children and young adults who had been given a terminal illness or had cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really gratifying. The best part was having them call me years later and say, I just had a baby, or I just got married.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the best part. I think that the worst part is fighting with insurance companies if you take insurance,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with that, advocating. So I think that's really frustrating. Or, trying to deal with people who don't want to be helped, being put in a position of that's really challenging, trying to help people and they sabotage it. And just clinically, I hope that your training prepares you for that, about, when clients sabotage themselves, sabotage therapy. That's very frustrating. It's very common. And it's very common, unfortunately, especially now, to have to deal with so many clients that are also on different types of substances.
Understood.
So hopefully your training's giving you that.
Gotcha. I appreciate you very much for sharing. Two more follow-up questions. This is great. Thank you, group. What's your stance? You mentioned insurance. What's your stance on not taking insurance as a psychologist?
I don't take insurance.
There's the stance right there.
I've not taken insurance since I've been in private practice.
Mm-hmm.
I charge a very reasonable low rate, I think, compared to other people of my training and background and experience on the job.
Mm-hmm.
I strive to be affordable.
Mm-hmm.
I take less money. I make less money, but I'm able to help people because they don't have to have the stress of dealing with insurance companies, and I don't have to have the stress of dealing with insurance companies.
Gotcha. Mutually beneficial.
That's me. So I make less money. I charge less money than other psychologists because they're charging based on insurance reimbursement, and I don't do that. And I also have a sliding scale, so that's part of my practice too.
Understood. Understood. Thank you. Great question from the group. Another great question from the group. How did the health emphasis of the PhD program influence your career path?
Oh, thanks for asking. Okay. So that was incredibly important. Because I was in the health psych program compared to the clinical psych. No, I'm not meaning to in any way put down the clinical psych. I'm just saying for me, I was able to get internships in areas that I was really interested in and fellowships. So I was really interested in cancer, and cancer in the brain, and survivorship and the impact of different chemotherapeutic agents on the brain. So having that training, I don't know if it's the same now, but back then we took several courses at the medical school at Albert Einstein, which proved to be so important. My knowledge of anatomy, physiology, we took that. Epidemiology, so important. Psychopharm, super important to, I hope you guys all have a course in psychopharm. Really important to know, neuroscience, neural structures, terminology. It's really great, especially if you want to get an internship and get a job in a hospital setting.
Understood. Thank you very much. Next question is more of a oriented around, I guess, your personal experience in balancing things, specifically while in grad school. So, how did you work to balance perhaps family, personal life while in grad school? And this is your choice to share as you will. Did you ever have to take a leave of absence or time away from your program in order to make that balance work for you?
No, I never took a leave of absence. The one thing that's different back then, there weren't as many scholarships, or there wasn't as much FA for grad students back then.
Hmm.
I worked 2 jobs. So in addition to going, taking the bus from Manhattan up to every night, I took the bus every day. I held down 2 jobs. I had 2 part-time jobs to help support myself and pay for being in Manhattan. So that was really hard. And then on internship, it was extremely difficult on internship to survive. I had to ask for, I had to take out loans, which I think is just egregious. You're on internship. Back then, we didn't have the limitations. I was working probably 80 hours a week at the University of Minnesota. My stipend was $15,000 a year. I had to find housing. I had to get a car. So I think the toughest part is financially during internship.
Mm, gotcha.
Fellowship was better. That was $37,000 a year.
Mm,
So I just don't know how you guys are doing it. I mean, there's no way you can live on $15,000 a year.
hmm.
So there you go.
Got it.
That's level.
Gotcha. Gotcha. We have another question from the group. Do you feel that it's feasible to start a family, have children early in a clinical neuropsych career, or do you believe that in order to pursue this type of career, we should plan to have children later on?
I had my I I had my child later on, like after I was done, with fellowship and 2 fellowships. So I waited. We waited. I waited. I
Got
mean, I waited. I just like I know someone that became pregnant during their fellowship, and they had to take a leave of absence.
hmm.
So I can just speak as a woman. I don't know about the guys, what their feeling is about it, but or how they can manage it. But for me as a woman, I just waited. And
Gotcha.
it's really great. You have a really great life balance, work-life balance as a parent. The friends of mine who are parents and are neuropsychologists and or psychologists, we have a really good work-life balance. But we waited.
Hmm. I appreciate very much your honesty and your willingness to share those responses. Another one from the group. Thank you, everybody in this group today, just continuing to engage. Once we are in a PhD program, would you suggest aiming for a specialized training track in terms of externship trajectory or more of a generalized track?
Um, it kind of depends on the specialty. So I did a specialty on my in my externships and my internship and my fellowships, but it wasn't just one; it was 2. It was kind of convertible, so I could go either way and have that flexibility. So it was neuropsych and um, cancer health psychology together, so I could go either way. So and you can do it. And I know people. Actually, I have a friend who did her internship at Johns Hopkins. She's in Connecticut now and is a school psychologist. She did neuropsych and school psych, clinical psych, child psych combo. And now she heads up, this whole region of school psychologists in Connecticut. So she had that flexibility also.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you. Just taking the temperature of the group. We got one more question coming in. We got time
Okay.
for maybe one more after that.
Okay.
What business courses, because you mentioned you have a business acumen, what business courses helped you open and maintain your private practice?
I had taken some marketing classes at NYU, and then having worked in nonprofit where you have to get funding and write grant proposals and all that good stuff. So that was kind of like learning on the job. I would, and then back in the day, again, I'm sorry to say this, but we had these really great presenters that would come in from pharma companies, drug companies, that would teach us like how to write a proposal and how to give a presentation, but that's no longer, you can't do that anymore at Yeshiva.
Yeah.
So I would definitely do an online course on writing a grant. It's not that hard. And, marketing courses. And there's a lot, and then also the other thing that's really important, you can get this from the APA and or the New York State Psychological Association. Take as many courses as you can on, the legalities, professional practice, legal issues that come up.
Extremely valuable. Thank you. My final question for you is, if our students who are in attendance or anybody was interested in reaching out to you personally so that they can connect and learn from you, maybe have a conversation like this, when they're contacting you on LinkedIn, for example, what kind of messaging do you want to hear from them? How specific do you want for them to be about where they're headed? Anything that might help them to better get you to know what they're looking for and looking for you as a support resource?
Yeah, just, contact me on LinkedIn, Sherry Skyler Kelly, PhD, and maybe you can put the link up to LinkedIn. You can, message me. That's really easy. That's a really great way to reach me. I have an email, which is sherry@mindandheartcoaching.com. But, LinkedIn, I see even faster than my emails. I think it's more direct. So I'm happy to get back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And final for sure this time, question from the group.
Okay.
Why don't you speak a little bit about your organization? Tell us
My,
about your work.
all
Yes. Positivity.
right.
Yes.
I have a coaching practice. I'm a psychologist, but I also do executive coaching, mind and heart coaching. Thank you for letting me share this. This is really crazy. So I have a organization called Positivity Teens. It's trademarked. And I, as a neuropsychologist and a parent, I am really concerned and have been for many years about the impact of digital technology and artificial intelligence on our brains and how we develop as humans. And I started writing about video gaming and the impact on gaming about 20 years ago when I first saw the real impact when I was doing testing of kids. And a lot of parents came to me and they were concerned about gaming. And I actually wrote an article about it for one of the Westchester papers. And I give talks about it. So Positivity Teens is a resource for parents, teens, students, educators. And I go around and I explain the neuroscience of gaming and social media, how it works on your brain, and then how to counteract the impact of social media in particular, and gaming to a certain extent using positive psychologies and CBT strategies. So, how to counteract that. And most likely, if any of you are going to go into child psych, adolescent psych, or working with young adults, you will be dealing with clients who have gaming addictions. So I don't know if you guys are taught that in grad school. I hope you are. I hope that's a component of your education because you will all deal with that at some point. Whether it's, gaming, internet addiction, gambling online, something, you're going to have to know how to deal with that. Or refer them out, but understand the impact of it, neurologically as well as psychologically.
Understood. Dr. Kelly, this has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Everyone who's in attendance, thank you so much for joining.
Great meeting you. Good luck, everybody. I wish you the best. Stay in touch. Let's talk again if you want. And love to stay in
Most
I
certainly. I
that's
made sure to include your LinkedIn, Dr. Kelly. I put it in the chat so that students can go and connect with you as well after this, hopefully inspired by this conversation and
I
what
have
you
a
shared.
question for you. Wait a second. I have a question for your gallery.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
What's your favorite course at Yeshiva?
You heard it here. Type it in into the chat if you're still
Type
in
it in
the favorite
or
course.
undo your
Or
mic. Let me know. What's your favorite course so far at Yeshiva?
I mean, I'm only a freshman, but I think I like discrete structures.
Oh,
They're,
wow. Cool.
yeah.
Oh my God. My daughter likes that too.
Yeah, it's very interesting to learn about combinatorics and permutations and all that.
That's so cool. Oh, that's great. Good
Yeah.
for you. Well, I just want are you taking a psychology course?
Next semester I'm going to. I actually switched from computer science into psychology, but I realized a bit late.
Oh, you got to talk to me about my thing. Yeah. So I think one of the really hot areas in the future will be the combination of data analytics and psychology.
Oh, okay. Wow. Oh, wow.
All right. That's where it's going. And, when you think about AI also, everything is AI is being programmed now. So everything that's out there in the internet is being used to program AI. So, when we look at, combining psychology with data analytics for the future of AI is going to be a really hot career.
Thank you. I'll definitely take a look into that.
Okay.
Terrific. You heard it, everybody. Hedge your bets in your
Hedge
education.
your bets. And if
The
he likes
combination
to
of
read
those
stuff, he's a smart guy.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good.
What's another popular course you guys like?
You could put it in the chat or you could shout it out.
Hi, I'm actually in the PhD program now at Ferkauf. So I would say my favorite course is probably Psychopathology and Illness with Dr. Weinberger.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you're learning about a lot of medical illnesses that coincide with psychopathology.
Yeah, and we're learning how to administer the SCID. So it's been a great course.
That's really useful. That's really great. That's really good. Well, if you guys want me to, when COVID's over, if you want me to do a webinar for you on the impact of technology and social media on psychology, tell one of your professors or see if Matt can arrange it. Okay, because I'm happy to do it.
That'd be a terrific dialogue as well. And if you want to email me for that so that we can coordinate it, by all means. And Dr. Kelly and I will also stay in communication so that we can make that a possibility in the spring.
There's a few of you on here, but can I share a personal story about psychology?
Sure. Okay.
So I've lived through a few tragedies, one in New York, 9/11. My husband was a first responder. And I was working in the city that day. But the other tragedy happened about 2.5 years ago down here in Florida. And I was on my way to pick up my daughter at school. She was a teenager then. And we lived in a little town called Parkland. Heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm driving to pick up my daughter. And I'm thinking about, well, what am I going to say to her? Here I am, a psychologist, and I have all this training. And so if, down the road, when you guys become parents, you'll see that there'll be those moments in time when you're just going to have to rally and think about everything you've learned, everything you may have trained for might just come together in one moment, And the thing that I wasn't prepared for was when she got in the car and she said, "Mom, I saw it all on video, on snaps and FaceTime."
That's intense.
So it's tough. So, it's like, that's like something that the younger generation that you're going to be treating, they're going to deal a lot with what they see on this. You know, this is a big part of their life, you know, tragedy and TikTok, you know, you're dealing with both. But so that was just personally, that was just really something that was very challenging to me. And that's, you know, one of the reasons why I do the Positivity Teens workshop, because my daughter saw stuff on FaceTime or Snaps, which, you know, Snapchat goes really quickly, that you could not show on CNN because it was just too violent. So.
Very, very challenging indeed. And I appreciate your honesty. This whole conversation has been terrific value. And we still have our students here who some have left, but I would imagine that those who are here are captivated by what it is that you're sharing. I hope that they're able to follow up with you. I hope that you
I wish you all luck. It's a, you know, it's a long road. It really is. And you need to do some things to sustain yourself and nurture yourself and take care of yourselves, because you're taking care of other people. And, you know, just make sure you guys, you know, keep positive relationships in your lives, you know, get support from other people, and, you know, make sure that people are nurturing you too.
Excellent.
We need you in this profession, so don't quit.
Thank you so much again. To everyone in attendance, thank you for joining us. Dr. Kelly will be in touch very soon.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Everybody, be well.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.